there is a peculiar silence that enters the soul of one who has spent too long hiding from their own sensitivity, a silence not born of peace, but of suppression, of a truth that has not yet found language. And so, I ask you to come with me tonight, not merely as observers of a theory or students of an idea, but as travelers through the cavernous inner world, where the cry of the sensitive soul echoes like wind through ancient hollows. You may have heard them called highly sensitive people, HSPs, as if even their name had to be whispered. But what if I told you that the HSP is not merely a fragile being, but a wounded healer in disguise? That behind their overstimulation lies a mythic calling, a destiny inscribed by pain, shadow, and profound attunement to the world's invisible weavings. If we are to understand this archetype, this living force, we must first plunge into the symbolic waters from which it rises. The myth of Chiron, the wounded centaur, should be summoned here. For Chiron, unlike the other wild centaurs, was wise, civilized, and tutored in the healing arts, and yet, in a twist of divine paradox, he was struck by an incurable wound. It is this paradox that forms the nucleus of our exploration, the wound that teaches, the suffering that refines perception, the exile that births insight. Is this not the very root from which the empathic temperament grows? A person born with heightened sensitivity does not merely see the world, they feel it in their flesh. Their nervous system is a tuning fork struck by every frequency in the emotional air. Crowds do not simply overwhelm them, they drown in them. Harsh words do not simply injure, they pierce. But herein lies the dangerous half-truth of modern pathologizing. We treat this receptivity as deficit. As disorder, we do not pause to ask what initiatory journey might be hidden in their overstimulation. I have long believed, and I speak now from the voice of dreams, of symbols, and the murmurs of the unconscious, that the HSP is not weak. They are unguarded. They were born without armor, because their task is not to conquer, but to transmute. Their pain is not a pathology, it is a preparation. For such souls, early life often delivers an experience of emotional abandonment or overstimulation, so profound that they are forced to exit the surface self and retreat into the interior, and it is in that subterranean exile that something remarkable occurs. They become psychically attuned. Think now of the forest-dwelling shamans of old, those who fell ill with soul sickness and returned with healing songs. Think of the mystics who, tormented by ecstasies and visions, brought back truth no priest could dare speak. This is the path of the wounded healer, and the highly sensitive person may be its modern secular incarnation. Do not mistake their softness for fragility. It is precisely their porousness that allows them to perceive what others cannot. But what a terrible cost, for without guidance, the empath becomes a mirror without form, absorbing until they no longer know where the world ends and they begin. Now let us move deeper into the domain of the archetype. Archetypes are not ideas, they are living patterns within the psyche. The blueprints of experience shaped over millennia. And the wounded healer is one such pattern. The HSP is often called to serve, to listen, to mend, not because they are whole, but because they are broken with awareness. It is their pain that sharpens their intuition. The mother who senses her child's unspoken grief, the artist who paints sorrow with a color the world has never named, the therapist who hears in silence what the client cannot speak. These are not traits of mere personality, they are calls from the archetype, but here we must tread carefully. For every archetype has a shadow. The wounded healer's shadow is the martyr, the one who bleeds without boundary, who rescues without being asked, who believes that love must be purchased through pain. The highly sensitive person, if unaware, may fall into this trap, becoming a psychic sponge, a perpetual fixer, a silent sufferer. The unconscious cries, if I can just heal enough people, maybe my wound will finally disappear. But the truth, dear listener, is this: the wound never disappears. It becomes a portal. Let us now turn inward, into dream. For the dream world is the royal road to the unconscious, and within the dreams of the highly sensitive, one often finds powerful symbols of flooding, of collapse, of animals that speak or guide. I once worked with a patient, a woman who from childhood was told she was too sensitive, too emotional, too much. She dreamed of walking through a house submerged in water, furniture floating, walls weeping. She was terrified, but when we peeled back the layers, we saw it clearly. Her psyche was showing her that her boundaries had dissolved, that her inner world had become saturated by unprocessed sorrow. The dream did not come to punish, it came to warn and to initiate through the waters of sorrow. She was being asked to rebuild, this time with sacred architecture, stone by stone, with understanding and with limits. For the HSP must learn the paradox of psychic containment. You cannot save the world if you are drowning in it. Your sensitivity is only a gift when it has become integrated, shaped, bounded by consciousness. Otherwise, it becomes possession, a haunting the soul lost in its own open channel. But there is another side, and it is luminous when the highly sensitive person does the inner work, when they face the wound not with shame, but reverence. Something miraculous occurs. Their empathy becomes discerning. Their care becomes directed. They no longer collapse into pain. They hold it. They become vessels of presence. They can walk into the storm and not be scattered, because now their sensitivity is anchored in meaning. The journey to this place, however, is harrowing. It demands a confrontation with one's own shadow, with rage, with need, with the secret desire to be saved. And that is perhaps the most difficult truth I must say tonight. The healer must abandon the fantasy of rescue. No one is coming. There is no parent to finally give what was missed, no world that will adjust to their vibration. The HSP must become their own inner anchor. They must call their energy back. They must sit with their sensitivity until it becomes fire. Do not be afraid of this fire. It is not destruction, it is transmutation. It is the alchemical forge in which the empath is transformed into the intuitive seer, the grounded healer, the mystic who walks with open eyes. Here we find the final paradox: what once felt like a curse, the overstimulation, the overwhelm becomes a compass. The wound becomes wisdom. The exile becomes initiation. And the soul, once fragmented by its own openness, becomes a channel through which meaning itself flows. And yet, dear ones, let us not romanticize the suffering. For while the alchemical fire transforms, it also consumes. The path of the wounded empath is strewn with ash relationships that burn too fast, identities that were dissolved in the tides of another's need, voices that were silenced so others could speak louder. The HSP who has not yet found their inner sanctuary becomes a forest without fences, sacred, yes, but trampled. Their sensitivity, unclaimed and unguarded, becomes the very source of their pain. This is why individuation, the sacred task of becoming oneself, is the soul's highest necessity. Not simply knowing who you are, but reclaiming what was fragmented. For the HSP, individuation demands the painful work of disentangling empathy from enmeshment, of learning that compassion does not mean surrendering one's center, of realizing that feeling everything is not a virtue when it drowns the voice of one's own soul. It is here that the archetype of the inner hermit becomes crucial. The hermit withdraws not to escape life, but to hear the deeper music beneath its noise. And so, the highly sensitive person must cultivate a solitude that nourishes their psychic skin, not isolation, but intentional silence, time in nature, in contemplation, in art, not as luxury, but as medicine. The HSP's nervous system is attuned like the strings of a lyre. It must be tuned in the temple, not in the marketplace. And dreams will return again and again, like sacred messengers. A man dreams of being hunted by wolves, fierce, red-eyed, relentless. He wakes gasping, certain that danger is near. But what if the wolves were not enemies? What if they were the wild instincts he suppressed in order to be good, to be kind, to be gentle? The dream asks, what part of you did you exile to remain sensitive? And is that part still hunting you in the dark? The truth is, this sensitivity without integration is vulnerability, but sensitivity with integration is vision. The HSP who journeys inward discovers that their empathy is not merely reactive, it is perceptive. They learn to read the field, to sense what lies beneath appearances. They become emotional cartographers, mapping the inner worlds of others because they have dared to explore their own. But this gift is sacred only when it is balanced with sovereignty. And sovereignty for the HSP is not about hardness, it is about rootedness. To stand in a room full of feeling, full of conflict, full of pain, and not dissolve, to witness suffering and not take it in as one's own, to offer healing not from depletion, but from overflow. This is not detachment. It is conscious containment, and it is the fruit of the shadow work. No one sees the long nights of self-excavation, the setting of boundaries that feel like betrayal, the death of codependent dreams. Let me speak now to the deepest layer, the spiritual function of the wound. For Jung taught that the neurosis is not merely a symptom to be removed, but a signal from the soul, a cry for meaning. The highly sensitive person, wounded by life's intensity, is not being punished, they are being summoned. Their ache is a question, where is God in this pain? And often that question is answered not in words, but in presence, in the way their body tenses before another even speaks, in the way their tears come not just from sadness, but from recognition, in the way they feel the grief of the world as if it were their own heartbeat. The sacred wound does not close like a scar. It opens like a window. And through that window, light enters, sometimes blinding, sometimes soft, but always illuminating. And this is the final paradox. What you thought disqualified you from life, your intensity, your emotionality, your inability to get over things, may in fact be the very thing that opens you to divine intimacy. The highly sensitive person, when awakened, is a bridge between realms, between seen and unseen, between pain and purpose, between human suffering and archetypal healing. But they must cross that bridge alone first before they can guide others. They must touch the wound with their own hands, must descend into their own underworld, must sit with their own shadow and hear it speak, not of terror, but of truth. Only then can they return as healer, not with prescriptions, but with presence, not with answers, but with attunement, not with certainty, but with soul, and the world will not always understand them. Their power is quiet, their magic is invisible, but they are the keepers of the in-between, the liminal, the sacred silence, where brokenness becomes blessing. So I say to you now, if you are one of them, if your body trembles at cruelty, if your heart aches for strangers, if you have felt the weight of the world on your skin, do not flee, do not numb, do not trade your gift for armor. Let your sensitivity become sacred. Let it teach you to listen, not just outwardly, but inward, to hear the rustle of archetypes in your dream, to sense the pulse of the collective wound, to cradle the world not with fear, but with fidelity to your soul. The journey is not safe, but it is holy, and you were never meant to walk it asleep. You are not too much, you are the healer in disguise. And so the image returns, again the bridge. The wounded healer must become it, plank by plank, with every truth faced, every illusion dismantled, every inherited role relinquished. This is not the healing of fixing, it is the healing of embodying. The HSP learns not to flee their sensitivity, but to inhabit it with consciousness. They stop apologizing for their tears, their silences, their needs. They realize that to feel deeply is not to be broken, it is to be awake in a world lulled to sleep by numbness. You see, in the mythology of the psyche, the most dangerous thing is not pain, it is unconsciousness. The HSP who represses their gift becomes bitter, anxious, fragmented. Their body aches with unshared grief. Their dreams become chaotic or absent. But the one who embraces it with reverence begins to transmute slowly, ritualistically. They begin to reclaim their rhythm. They learn the cycles of their nervous system, when to engage, when to retreat. They see relationships not as escape, but as mirrors for their growth. And now, if we may, let us walk for a moment into the archetypal forest of the collective unconscious. There are figures here, old, cloaked, whispering, the orphan, the mystic, the seer, the exile. Each one represents a psychic function within the sensitive soul. The orphan holds the pain of abandonment, the mystic, the hunger for divine union, the seer, the visionary gift, and the exile, the perpetual outsider. The HSP must meet them all, not to integrate them quickly, but to sit beside them, listen to their lamentations, honor their story. These are not pathologies, these are soul initiators. A man I once treated would often dream of a cathedral with no roof. Rain fell directly onto the pews, and yet he sat there unmoved. When asked why, he said, "Because that is how I know God is still weeping with me." You see, that is not pathology. That is soul. That is the sacred sorrow of the sensitive. Not a symptom to be treated, but a presence to be honored. The roofless cathedral becomes an image of spiritual openness, and yes, also of exposure. But what if it is that very exposure that allows divine rain to reach the soul? Sensitivity then is not a mistake. It is a mystery. It is the language of a soul that refuses to go numb. In a world addicted to numbness, to scrolling, to shouting, to splitting, the highly sensitive person becomes a living oracle, but only when they have first learned to listen to themselves, to no longer outsource their reality to others' comfort, to stop adjusting their truth to make others feel safe. That is the dark initiation to become the one who feels and speaks. Let us not forget the voice of the empath has been historically silenced. Mystics burned as witches, dreamers locked away, women told they were hysterical, men told to harden up, but the soul has no gender and sensitivity has no shame. The healing begins when the HSP reclaims their place in the lineage of feeling, when they understand that their ancestors were not weak, they were medicine keepers, dream readers, peace weavers, truth sayers. And yes, they were wounded, but they were never broken. In analytical psychology, we speak often of wholeness, and wholeness, let me remind you, is not perfection. It is inclusion. It is when the shadow is welcome to the table, when the grief is sung, not silenced, when the nervous system, once scolded, is honored like a sacred animal, trembling, yes, but honest. Wholeness is when the HSP stops trying to become less and begins to become more of who they already are. And that, dear soul, is the deeper purpose of this wound, to awaken, to return, to reclaim, not to become someone new, but to finally inhabit the truth that has always lived beneath the noise. The truth that you do not need to harden to survive, that you do not need to heal fully to be worthy, that your very wound, tender, radiant, trembling may be the doorway through which God speaks. There are no guarantees in this work, no final destination, no full immunity from pain, but what there is is presence, and that presence, when rooted in soul, can hold the world. The HSP does not need to fix everyone. They only need to be fully here, to listen, to speak with soul, to walk softly, but without apology, to feel deeply, but without drowning. And perhaps one day they will meet another along the path, another whose eyes hold oceans, whose voice carries quiet thunder, and in that sacred meeting they will recognize, I was never alone. My wound was never exile. It was initiation, and now I return, not as victim, but as vessel. There is, in the end, a return, but it is not a return to who one was. It is a return of the soul clothed in knowing. The highly sensitive person, having walked the labyrinth of pain, emerges, not healed in the way the world expects, but transformed, no longer haunted by every emotion that passes through the air. They have become choosers of presence. They no longer confuse reaction with compassion, nor silence with peace. They understand that being sensitive is not about fragility, it is about capacity, about resonance, about standing near the heart of things without being consumed by their fire. You must understand, individuation does not demand you be without flaw. It requires that you be in relationship with your depths, and the HSP's depths are vast, oceanic. Their sorrow is ancient. Their joys are celestial. Their body is a sanctuary of echoes, ancestral, collective, personal. The work is not to seal it off, but to filter it wisely, to learn when to open and when to close, when to absorb and when to mirror. For even the most radiant light can burn, if not softened by care. Let us revisit the dream once more. The cathedral, the wolves, the flood, they do not go away. They return as cycles, not to torment, but to invite. Each re-entry into the dream is a spiral inward, and in this spiral, the HSP becomes an alchemist. They draw gold from sorrow. They create music from grief. They birth new symbols, ones that speak not only for themselves, but for the voiceless collective. They become mystics of the modern age, not cloaked in robes, but wrapped in nervous systems that feel like violins. They are not always noticed. Their service is often invisible, but when you find them, these souls who feel like home, who look into you rather than at you, you will know, for their very presence is sacramental, not in grandeur, but in depth, not in performance, but in presence. They do not preach, they radiate, they do not fix, they witness, they do not save, they see. And so, if you are such a soul, let this be your remembrance. You were never wrong to feel, you were never too much. Your wound is your passage. Your pain is your permission. Your sensitivity is not a flaw, it is the fingerprint of the sacred upon your nervous system. But you must honor it, not offer it up for misuse. You must create boundaries, not to shut the world out, but to keep your inner temple intact. You must say no. When the world demands your collapse, you must walk away. When your soul starts to leave your body, you must create, not as performance, but as offering. You must speak, not to be heard, but to be true. You must live, not to be liked, but to be whole. And in doing so, you will become a mirror for others. You will awaken the silent ones. You will call the hidden ones home. You will show that feeling deeply is not the opposite of strength, it is the root of it. You will embody what the world has forgotten, that healing is not about returning to what was, but about becoming what has never been. You will be the wound that walks, the presence that holds, the mystery that reminds. I leave you now not with answers, but with a question, the kind that lives in the bones. What if your sensitivity was never meant to be tamed, but trained? What if the ache you carry is the map to your medicine? You are not merely highly sensitive, you are highly significant, a vessel through which the invisible speaks, weeps, listens, and heals. Honor the gift. Let it speak. Let it shape you. Let it lead. Let it love.